And also, she has been a trainer for dolphins and dolphin shows. And I was just thinking, Wendy, how did you end up training dolphins?
They had a dolphin pool in one of the shows that I was in Paris. And the funny thing was that I was actually not working with that show, but I worked on television as a dancer with one of the boys that was working in that show. And he said, oh, by the way, you know, the girl who's doing the dolphin act is leaving. And you say you swim very well. Why don't you ask for a job? And I said, well, why not? So I went to the Moulin Rouge, actually, and I said, you know, I'm a swimmer. Here we come. They took me immediately because she was leaving. You see, they had really very little choice. And it turned out that they didn't even know I was a dancer. They thought I was just someone who worked with animals and who was a swimmer. So it was really interesting.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Maybe we hear more about these dolphins. But definitely Wendy has a colorful background. But what is really beautiful is that you have also been with Brahma Kumaris for 39 years.
Yeah.
And that's a long, long time. Also, I know that you have kept many silence retreats in Italy and also other countries around the world. So today's topic, the benefits of silence, I know really comes from a lady who knows really deep secrets about silence and also what silence is doing for us. So warm welcome, and also welcome for everyone else to join today's lecture.
Thank you. So shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the silence retreats that we did in Italy were actually quite popular, I must say. They were popular not only with the Brahma Kumaris that used to participate, but we used to do a silence retreat for people who were not Brahma Kumaris. You know, we did very general silence retreats too, because maybe inspired by the actual place, because that area around Assisi is full of enormous monasteries where it's a very well-known thing to go to a monastery and spend a few days in silence. I mean, this is something that a lot of people actually do in Italy. It's a well-known thing. And a lot of the monasteries are quite willing to do this. So, I mean, offering a silence retreat for a long weekend is not a surprising thing for Italian people. It's rather nice, actually, to work with them. Because they understand that it's part of their religious background. Now, we didn't use the silence as a religious thing, but we used it more as a self-discovery thing, because you can't really discover yourself till you sit with yourself. And when you're sitting with other people and you're chatting, well, you're not sitting with yourself, you're sitting with others. And so it does it requires silence to be able to do that. But silence is not just a lack of speaking. It's not just stopping talking. You know, it's not, that would seem to be a very negative thing. There is an enormous amount of things going on inside of us, each one of us. And it's very good to know what actually is really going on inside of you. We show a certain amount of personality or thoughts, ideas, attitudes towards other people. But to what an extent do I really know what's actually going on with me? And silence can help you discover where you're at in your life. We can go along quite superficially in our lives, but just working and traveling and doing this and doing that, and going on holiday. But you don't really look at what's underneath. And one can't forget, really, in a spiritual context, that what's going on underneath is actually where your happiness resides. Because when you think about silence, you wonder, well, what am I meant to do there? And actually, when you go into silence, it's not just a lack of conversation, it's discovering yourself. To what extent have you really become a friend of yourself? To what an extent do you know yourself? And unless you really know yourself, it's a very unpleasant feeling to be left alone with yourself. I mean, a lot of people will go to great lengths, as we say in English, to avoid being left alone. There's a fear of loneliness or being alone. There's a fear of silence, but it's you fear silence when you don't know actually what silence offers, what it provokes. And it really does help you to understand you, because you can't really understand you by listening to other people and what their opinions are, because they are opinions. They don't really know why. I mean, I'll give you an example of how I fixed a relationship, because it's very important in these ways of understanding each other. For example, I fixed my relationship with my mother by understanding her, where that soul was at, why, what she'd lived through, what she'd experienced. And this permitted me to realize that a lot of the mistakes that she made with me when I was a child, well, it was only normal considering what she'd lived. Now, unless you give that some thought process, you're not going to discover it. And this permitted me to, in a certain sense, accept. I'm not saying forgive, because I didn't think there was anything really to forgive, but to be rid of the difficulties that I was having because of her attitude. And this can happen to a lot of people. This is one of the indications that I gave, of what can happen in silence, is you can really understand the dynamics, the psychological dynamics, and then you understand why people are the way they are. But there are many, many other things. You need to find who you are. And in silence, you might look at yourself in the mirror and think, oh, I'm very different to what I was when I was a child. The mirror is not showing you the same picture. It isn't, but it's still you. Now, if it's still you, who's you? Because the two pictures are completely different, right? And you might just think, oh, then I was young and that was nice. Now I'm old and it's not nice at all. Well, that doesn't make it easy for you to live with yourself. And one of the things that we have going on in life is that very often, the older you get, the more time you spend alone, which means the more time you spend probably with yourself in silence. And a lot of people don't like this. They're unhappy with it. If you've managed to create a friendship with yourself, you've looked at the different phases you've gone through in your life, and you've come to a conclusion, and you've even come to understand the mistakes you made, but admire also certain positions of really heroic positions that only you can know, difficulties that you overcame, and you overcame those difficulties, and you possibly never thought of saying to yourself, that was really good. You're happy if there's a good outcome, like you pass an exam or you win something, and that can be very satisfying. But what is it that made you win? What was it that actually, what was the good thing that you were doing? What is the good in you that you can be friendly with? can you really be a friend of yourself? Is it good to be a friend? Are you a good friend? Or do you criticize yourself? Now, a lot of people find it very easy to say a lot of the weaknesses they might have. They don't find it that easy to say what the qualities are that they have. What are their virtues, for example? People are very ill at ease about that. And apart from the fact that it is useful to know how virtues are created, it's also good to be able to appreciate what you do have that is positive, that you can give to others, and what is good and is positive that you yourself are proud of. And that creates a different relationship with yourself and creates much more self-esteem. People these days have a lot of problems with self-esteem. And it's quite understandable because, there's a lot of competition going on and there's a lot of criticism. And, you might believe that what other people are saying is true. Is it? It's interesting. Is it? You can learn a lot by thinking what they say. Is there a little bit of truth in that? Or is it just competition? Because you naturally, if you're competing with someone, that person can't possibly be your friend. It has to be, obviously, by definition, someone you're competing with is the enemy, right? It's the person to beat. We don't think about that when we think of competing. And so these things, or these people that compete, can't possibly be your friends. Who are your friends? What is a friend? And they're friends that are for short periods, friends that are there for long periods. And it's good to look at all of this. We don't think of looking at it, And silence is, if you think of it, silence is the base for invention, creativity, all kinds of art, discoveries, science. I mean, anything we can see that's not alive and is not a plant, for example, has been made by human beings. I mean, I've got on my desk, I've got a magnifying glass, and this magnifying glass, which permits me to see things, and it looks horrible on Zoom. There we go. Everything that I've got on my desk here, and there's a lot of junk, was made by a human being who started in silence. They started in silence by thinking, this could be useful. Wouldn't it be nice if we had something like that? And they started creating in the mind. And so everything that we do and everything that we own, literally, is a product of someone's mind and someone's creativity or someone's invention. And so we're using all these things, but we're forgetting where they came from. We're not developing our own minds. Now, I'm not saying we need to develop our minds to create things. Maybe we will, but using our minds in a way that makes us happy and removes some feeling of dis-ease that we might have in certain moments in our life. That is a very worthwhile thing. And it's a platform, literally. Science is where invention and creativity start. Without silence, you can't. Without thinking, you can't really create anything. And you can't change anything. We're not the victims of destiny. In a great part, we've created our own destiny, but we can also change destiny by realizing what's happening and how we are reacting, and whether the way we're behaving and the way we're reacting is creating benefit for us or not. And if it's not, what would work? And, as I was working with dolphins, we were speaking beforehand about it, dolphins are incredibly creative and they don't accept criticism. They only accept positive input. Now, that is an incredibly wonderful thing to learn. You don't criticize or punish, heavens above, punish. I mean, you don't punish a dolphin. He doesn't accept it. He's offering you, as far as he's concerned, he's offering you his friendship. And what right do you have to punish him? You don't have any right. He doesn't give you the right. I don't know where human beings gave each other the right to criticize and punish each other. I mean, the dolphins taught me a lot of things. I mean, going along, it's actually true. Now, when we look at ourselves in the mirror and think, well, I'm not a child anymore and I'm an adult and I'm much older and I don't look the same. Well, okay, I realize that my body's not the same. It's much older, but then who am I? What am I inside? What is there inside? And I had an incredible experience with some friends who I hadn't seen in something like 40 years at least. I'd been at school with this one person, and she had found me through Google. She'd Googled my name one day and it came up and she started reading and she found me on Facebook and then etc. And, before all of these wonderful things, we would have not been able to communicate because we last saw each other when I was about 9. And you don't think of saying, give me your address. You don't think of that. But she wanted to see what had happened to me and she wondered. And she found me and we met. And we hadn't seen each other in at least 40 years. And much more, 60 years. Because I'm 80 and we left when I was 9. So, I mean, and of course the body had changed. What reference did I have? How was I going to recognize this person? Who was she? And it was extraordinary how I recognized her by the rhythm of the way she spoke. I recognized her through a vibration that was the same as when she was 10 years old. Now, this is the part of me that I want to find again in silence, because it's the real me. It's the me without any transformations and messing around. I mean, life messes you around, and so you change from the rather luminous child that you are. You can change to be rather twisted, and I recognized her through that. So, and this experience has happened to me before. There've been other experiences too. So you get in silence, you get down to realizing who you really are. And speaking on a spiritual level, we are all energy, peace, love, joy. Now, when you think of a baby, when you think of a puppy, puppies are souls too. That might be a surprise, but puppies are souls too. They express peace. Generally, when they're in peace, they fall asleep. And they express joy, and it's very easy, and they express love. And it's very simple. It's incredibly simple. But they haven't yet developed. They develop as they go on. They develop a personality. And the personality develops through mixing those different qualities. You mix a bit of love and they put a bit of peace and you get patience. Nobody was born with patience. We make patience. Now, these are things we need to understand and look at. Now, if we want to create enthusiasm, of course, we need to add a drop of joy. And these three energies that we actually are like the artist's primary colors. Like blue would be peace, I suppose, and red, of course, would be love, and yellow could be joy, And all painters use identically those three basic colors, but they mix them very differently. And nobody makes mistakes when they're trying to look at paintings and they see very clearly the difference between a Van Gogh and a Rembrandt, for example. You don't get them mixed up. And we don't get people mixed up. So who am I? What is my personality? How have I mixed my original qualities of peace, love, and joy to create my personality? What is there in the mixture that doesn't work, maybe? What is it that creates problems? And so you find yourself again by looking, like at times I say we've all got a library of experiences, and it's the time to open up that library when you're doing silence, and you open up your library and you read your life and the experiences that you had and how you learnt through these experiences. And sometimes we rush through an experience, but we never really look at what that experience has taught us. Maybe when we had the experience, we were young, we were immature, we didn't know how to do it anyway, possibly, and we never did. Now, in silence, you can actually learn from your way past experiences and realize that the outcome could have been different if you'd done things differently. Now, be willing to learn now something that you could have learned 20 years ago, but you were too immature to do so. So you can complete, in a certain sense, your learning process if you go back into certain experiences, and silence is the time to do that. And it's good to be quite constructive about it, and keep notes, maybe. Some people call it, they use diaries, or some people call it mapping, and it's very interesting to go back into your notebooks when you've left silence and you haven't done it for a year, and you go back and you think, what was I on about when I did silence last? And you see all the experiences you had and the realization. So it's good to write them down if you have experiences in silence, and not just let it flow, like life. Life flows. And if you don't look at it and you don't stop it and, in a certain sense, look at it clearly, it just passes, and you don't learn anything from it. So in each one of us, people go into silence very often because they want peace. And of course, if you're in silence, nobody's going to talk to you probably, and you don't want them to talk to you. But there is a space of peace within each one of us that is accessible in silence. And if you're not in silence, you can go for a very simple experience. You can go for a walk in nature, in a forest or somewhere. I have a nice screensaver that has the picture of a very nice lake up in the mountains. It's very beautiful. And the colors are stunning. And I look at that when I'm sitting at the computer at times. I just look at that background, and it brings me into a feeling of freshness, of peace inside. The image suggests that. So there's many, many different ways you can actually go into silence for short periods of time, just by looking at your screensaver on the computer. We are all absolutely unique. And you go to a program, you go to a workshop, and you will be taught the workshop by the teacher, whatever they're teaching, which is probably very good. But they're teaching something that is, what they teach you is the same thing as everybody else. You get the same input. In silence, when we had the retreats in Gubyom, there weren't two people that were doing the same thing. We had maybe 25 people, and those were 25 silence retreats that were totally different, because each one was doing something of their own. It was really important time for themselves. And so it demands a lot of respect, because you don't know what the other person is thinking, what they're doing in their silence. And it's the only time really that you can be so individual. And you've got to develop your individuality, because there aren't two people that are the same. So what is it that we're doing when we're given all the same things? What is it that we do with that? The same teachings. We might all receive the same teachings for whatever. Each one is doing something different with all of those teachings. And so what is it that I need to take from it? And how am I going to use it with my personality and my qualities, you know? And another big area of silence is looking at what was the base of the choices that I made in my life. Like, for example, the value systems that you use. And, you know, we talk about values. Politics talks about values too. I mean, you know. But my value system, was it based on my family? Was it based on my culture? Was it based on a particular society in a particular country? Each country is different. There aren't two countries that are the same. They all have completely different cultural ways of being, ways of communicating, and each one in each country is different. So this is a very fascinating thing, you know, and it's fascinating to develop what you are in such a way that you can enjoy whatever other culture is coming towards you. You know, are you flexible enough? Can you adapt to other cultures or other people or other ways of behaving? In a world that is so connected these days, I mean, apart from lockdown and that, in a world that is so connected, it's good to be able to interact and have that flexibility. And you won't be able to do that unless you really know yourself. And when you recognize actually what you're doing. I mean, let's say that you're in your kitchen and you've got all these jars with maybe your spices, and you know, you just use them at random. Well, the outcome's probably not going to be very good. But if you go inside the kitchen and look at each spice carefully and open the bottle and taste it, then when you take that spice, you know what you're using. And it's a little bit like that. Sometimes we just use habits, and it comes out just like that. And you don't think about it and you say, oh, I didn't mean that. Well, no, you didn't mean that. But what does it mean? You know, and there's something there that's uncontrolled. You went inside there and you just grabbed the first spice that looked green, you know, and the outcome was not what you wanted. So it's very good to know. It gives you more control over actually what you're doing. You understand yourself better when you've gone through all of that. I mean, I don't know whether I'm being too complicated with all of this, because you know, our life, especially one has grown a little bit older, you know, you wonder how you made your decisions. And it could have been, you know, based by your value systems with your culture or your family, or just very simply trial and error, as we say. You go along in life and you see things that don't work and you realize you've got to change. And so you try best practices and you learn best practices. And so at a certain age, you maybe are using best practices, which is good because you've learned, you know. But at times we need to review what we learned and bring it up to date, you know, make it more today, make it more present. And also along the way, when you're doing this, you will realize, possibly most people have this, not all, but most people, where you will realize that when you were young or when you were a child or something, you were hurt, someone shamed you, you were bullied, something happened. And, you know, children are very, they just keep going. Whatever happens, they just face it. They don't think about it. They don't dwell on it. And they just keep living, you know. But they don't realize that there is something maybe inside. There's like a thorn that continues to hurt. And if I'm realizing that there is something that is not going right, I need to maybe return to, with my consciousness of an adult. I know that whatever that thorn was, if someone bullied me at school, for example, the pain has remained. And there is no need for it anymore because that pain was related to a certain time in my life. And it's good to go back and remove that, remove the sharp, the needle, the thorn that is actually hurting, by realizing that you who suffered the pain then are not the you that needs to suffer the pain now. You're just carrying it with you. You're different. You're an adult. You have a choice. That moment has disappeared. We need to move on in our lives. And very often, if we don't think about these things, they continue to, should I say, distort our personality. And very often we don't realize it's happening till we look at maybe a pain we've had, that pain that we have carried with us since childhood, and that has made us behave in a diffident way or in a fearful way in certain situations. And so this is what I call, removing the thorn and drying the tears, because that the child had tears. It's very good to look at that child, and as you as the adult can give you, the child, comfort. I understand what happened to you. And you coped very well in those days, and it was difficult. But here you are now, and things have changed. So you can dry your tears. I will be here. I am adult now. I am not the child. And this is very healing. This is a part of silence that is actually can be very helpful when you get to know yourself really much more deeply, you know what I mean? And we get wise, we become wise with age, I think, you go along and you become a little bit wiser. And you get to realize the incredible courage at times possibly you've had in your life, things that you've had to face, which nobody else maybe knows really. And how did you face that? And you can look back and say, well, that was good. Nobody knew and nobody said anything to you, but that was good. I admire me, and that is a way of looking to see really how much self-respect you deserve. It's not so much how much self-respect you have, it's how much self-respect you deserve. And you definitely deserve not only self-respect, but you deserve to be loved. Mm. And it's easier maybe when it's not easy to love yourself. We always see the defects or the things that other people maybe don't like. But people don't have to like everything, that's in many ways their problem. We have to just work out to what an extent are we encroaching on their equilibrium. To what an extent am I creating problems for them? And is it me creating problems or is it them looking for them? Because we do this. If we have certain feelings inside, we tend to think that people can be refusing us or not being friendly with us. And that's just our problem. It's not maybe them, So we need to take all of this apart. And when are you going to do that if you don't do it in silence? So all of that is important. And
I just want to tell to the audience that they have a chance to also ask questions from you. I'm sure they will have some questions. And then in the end, we would like to have 10 minutes meditation, especially looking forward for this topic. And it's really wonderful how you have opened up this silence topic for us that we know ourselves better, and it's healing. We can become our friend for ourselves, and also what you said, healing relationships by understanding others better, by understanding yourself. So I think this has been very nice, but yes, just a notice for others if there's some questions, and I'm sure you want to still summarize something about your topic.
Well, there's one very important aspect, is, of course, in silence, it's the one time that you can invite in the divine. I mean, you can use the divine within your silence. It's not so much prayer, it's listening. You invite the divine and you listen. You can call him God if you like, if it makes you feel at ease, or you can consider him your friend. And I'll give you an example of that in the meditation as to how you could, because it's difficult to explain. It's easier to do it in the meditation at the end, you know. But how do we handle the divine? Do we talk to him or it, whatever? Or do we listen to him? And how does he influence if we just talk to him and then switch off, like we might listen to the computer and switch off? You know what I mean? To what an extent do we actually create a relationship? If I'm creating a relationship with me, I can also create a relationship with the divine in my silence. And that's a whole different aspect, which is very, very rich, actually.
Thank you. And I'm very happy about this last topic you took, the relationship to the Supreme. And also, I'm sure there are many who have been meditating, who are listening to you today, and they would like to have more experiences. So maybe you can give some tip to really get more experiences about the relationship to the divine.
Well, for example, what we used to do a whole day, for example, in Gubbio, on a relationship with the divine, and you invited him into your day, and you would take him for a walk, sit by the lake and chat to him. You would try and see what the vibration came, what feeling there came from that relationship. Because my experience personally, and I think a lot of other people too, is the moment that you start listening, you will perceive, you will hear. But it's not a sound hearing, it's a mental hearing and sometimes a heart hearing. And these hearings are undeniable, but you've got to listen. While you're still talking, and this is one of the reasons why we don't talk in silence, is because you're giving out, and in fact you need to listen all the time, and not only to other people, but you need to listen to yourself. And of course this is wonderful, because if you're in silence you can really listen to the Supreme. And so, I mean, we used to take him on walks, we used to eat with him, because we weren't talking to other people who were eating. We were having a very private conversation, you know, inside as you ate, you know, and all about your life. He's the one person you can totally trust and say anything to, and has absolutely no critical reaction at all. No negativity.
Wonderful.
Very nice.
Yeah. We have one question here, Wendy, and it is, Sanna is asking, is it sometimes better to leave the past into the past and stay in current moment and just accept that whatever has happened according to the drama? So is it better just to leave aside and continue? What do you think?
If you can do that, it's very good. What I'm saying is, what do you do when the negativity is affecting you? And just leaving it alone will mean that you will be twisted like a bonsai. You see what I mean? You know bonsai trees.
Yes.
Well, a bonsai has been twisted and has had copper wire put around it, and this is why it's all twisted like that. We at times end up like that. And that is a pretty strong image. But at times it's necessary to stop suffering, to stop hurting inside and having hurtful reactions. It's necessary to unravel it. If you can go along with that and leave it behind, then it's a good idea. If you can forget it, it's good. Very definitely. But not everybody can.
Mm.
And so it depends on who you are.
Okay. So I just listening to your ideas about silence. Have you ever kept a silence retreat in Zoom?
In Rome?
In Zoom? Via Zoom? No,
I haven't.
Doesn't work.
I started doing the silence retreats in '97, which was a long time ago. And they weren't popular in those days. I mean, nobody had been doing them and nobody had heard of them. But now that Zoom, I mean, there's so many silence retreats on Zoom, you've got them all the time. So there's so many of them that I haven't even thought of doing a silence retreat on Zoom. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was just wondering, do you think it will work, or does it? I have understood you also place an importance for the surrounding and nature.
We used to use surrounding and nature a lot, and I remember very clearly, being surprised at the difficulties that people had when they went into long periods of silence in Madhuban, because they felt rejected, they felt excluded. Now, of course, when you're living, eating, walking in nature, picking cherries, making jam, living normally in a very nice way in the country, you don't feel excluded. You're not talking to the person, but you're part of something that's happening together. And of course, on Zoom, most likely everybody is separate. I mean, my feeling is that it would only work if people actually came to a place together and did it. But then that's what we did in Wubia. It's a lot of silence is not to isolate you. It's to help you be more subtle in your relationships with other people. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but you'll find that people in a table, for example, the conversation might become rather silent, and everybody tries to find a subject so that hole, that gap, is not present. But then, because it puts people ill at ease. But if you notice people who have lived a long time together, like couples that have lived for years and years and years together, they will sit for long periods in silence together. And their silence is not rejecting the other, but they're just holding that space of silence together. So there's no loneliness in the silence.
Very nice.
We need to remove the loneliness from the idea of silence.
Yeah. So you're leaving two options for us. Either we have to bring you to Finland and have a lovely silence retreat in the nature of Finland, or then we have to all get our tickets. And it's a bit difficult, this traveling nowadays with all these corona passes, whatever, vaccination pass and this, but we can still maybe work out something, I'm sure.
We'll have to see how it works, really, see how it works out.
We have to take some inspiration from today's lecture. But Wendy, it would be really nice if you would guide us into silence.
Yeah, okay. I sit quietly, and my thoughts turn within. Generally, my thoughts follow my eyes, and the image that the eyes give me provokes my thoughts. Very often, the material world stimulates my thoughts. But now I turn into my inner sanctuary. Within, I can be myself. I can be alone. I don't have to invite anyone. I just need to be careful not to carry them in there with my thoughts. But at this moment, I just want to be free. I want to be me. And my inner space today is like a garden. I can enjoy my inner space in whichever way I choose. It just depends on my feelings and the creativity of my mind. And my garden is large, spacious, with lawns and tall trees. And the grass, each blade of grass is like a thought. And when the wind blows, the grass dances, moves. When clouds come over my garden and a storm arises within me, all my grass and my plants get watered. And when the storm passes, there is a freshness, and the sun returns. In my garden, I grow flowers. And I like to think of them as my qualities, my virtues that I'm trying to develop. And I have the red of courage and the blue of serenity and the yellow of cheerfulness. And I enjoy caring for the flowers, seeing them develop. In my garden, I have a gardener. The gardener advises me. He indicates the weeds. At times I think the weeds are new flowers. But he warns me that they need to be removed. And he praises my flowers. He gives me so much enthusiasm to grow more. All of us have gardens within. And the flowers that we grow are the most beautiful gifts that we have to give our friends. Although we all have gardens, we are a bit shy. We don't allow people to look into our gardens. We're still digging, growing, planting, removing weeds. But there will come a day when we will be able to see into each other's garden. And my flowers will meet your flowers. And we will all walk together on the green grass. And the gardener will smile. Om Shanti.
That was so wonderful. Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Absolutely wonderful. The silence and the beautiful words. So we are also happy and delighted that you came and visited our Sunday talks in Finland. And we hopefully see you again